I'll never forget the sound of her laughter that night. It wasn't the soft, familiar chuckle I fell in love with years ago. It was louder, sharper, like a weapon meant to cut. The kind of laugh that doesn't belong in a living room with your husband and child nearby. I had just put Ethan to bed, exhausted from his day of birthday excitement. His little snores came quickly, a sign of a happy, carefree 5-year-old. Meanwhile, downstairs, Judy was on the phone, her voice hushed but punctuated with bursts of that laugh. The laugh that raised the hair on the back of my neck. I didn't mean to snoop. Honestly, I didn't. But when I walked into the hallway, her voice became even quieter, and my name slipped from her lips. Walter wouldn't dare. He's too predictable. Pause. Then, no, he still has no idea. My stomach twisted. She'd been acting strange for weeks. More secretive, dismissive, distant. But hearing her talk about me like that, I froze in the hallway, straining to make out the rest. I know it's Ethan's birthday, Mark, but I can't keep doing this. He's so clingy. He thinks it's his big day. Can you believe it? Like I care. Mark. My brain went blank for a moment. Mark, her ex-Mark, who she swore she hadn't spoken to in years. Mark, who once drove past our house late at night and claimed it was a coincidence. I felt my pulse hammering in my ears. This wasn't just my imagination, was it? The tension I'd ignored, the weird nights out, her constant irritation with me and Ethan. There was something deeper happening here. I'll be there soon, she said, voice soft but with an edge. Don't worry. I've got the perfect excuse. He'll never know. I quietly backed away from the hallway and slipped into the guest bathroom, my thoughts spiraling. What the hell was she planning? And with Mark? I didn't even have time to process before I heard the slam of the front door. Peeking through the blinds, I saw her in the driveway, her arms around Mark. She kissed him, deeply, hungrily, and laughed again. That laugh. As his car pulled away with her in it, I felt a mix of rage and disbelief. It wasn't just betrayal, it was the sheer audacity, the recklessness. She left me and our son on his birthday for him. I went back upstairs and stared at Ethan as he slept. My sweet, innocent boy, who loved his mom so much. My hands clenched into fists. I had to protect him. From what exactly? I wasn't sure yet, but something about this felt darker than I'd even realized. The next morning, I woke up with a fire in my chest and the weight of unanswered questions pressing on me. Judy hadn't come home. Not a single text. Not a single call. Her absence wasn't just disrespectful. It felt deliberate, like she was daring me to react. I decided not to confront her immediately. Instead, I dropped Ethan off at school, plastering a smile on my face to hide the storm brewing inside me. He gave me a big hug, oblivious to the chaos his mom was causing. As I got back into the car, my phone buzzed. A message from Judy. Had to stay with a friend last night. Got too tipsy to drive. Don't overreact. No apology, no explanation. Just that cold, dismissive tone she'd perfected over the past few months. I stared at the screen, anger rising like a tidal wave, but I held it back. Something told me I needed more before I made my move. That afternoon, I called her friend Megan, the one Judy always used as her alibi. Megan's voice was hesitant when she picked up. Hey Megan, this is Walter. Sorry to bother you. Judy said she stayed with you last night. Just wanted to make sure she got home safe. There was a long pause, long enough to confirm what I already suspected. Yeah, Megan said finally, her voice shaky. She did. Thanks. I appreciate it, I said, keeping my tone even. By the way, I think she left something there. Mind if I swing by to grab it? Oh, she didn't leave anything here. Megan's nervous laugh gave her away. Megan, I said, my voice dropping. Don't lie for her. You're not very good at it. The silence on the other end was deafening. Then she hung up. I sat there, gripping the steering wheel, my heart pounding. Judy wasn't just lying. She was recruiting her friends to cover for her, and Megan wasn't the only one. The next few days were a blur of subtle investigation. I started paying attention to things I'd ignored before. Her casual mentions of late nights at work, the new outfits she bought just for fun. The way she kept her phone glued to her hand, always tilted away from me. But it wasn't until Thursday that I found the smoking gun. I came home early from work, something I never did, and found her in the living room, hunched over her laptop. She didn't hear me come in, too engrossed in whatever she was typing. "Hey, Judy," I said casually, walking into the kitchen. She slammed the laptop shut so fast it nearly fell off the table. "What are you doing home?" she snapped, her voice sharper than it needed to be. "Boss let us out early," I said, watching her carefully. "What's with the laptop? Working on something?" Her face turned red. "It's nothing. Just bills." "Bills?" I raised an eyebrow. "Pretty secretive for bills." "Walter, don't start," she said, standing up and grabbing the laptop. "Not everything is a conspiracy." That night, after she fell asleep, I crept downstairs and opened her laptop. She'd left it unlocked, a rare slip in her careful routine. I clicked on her email and there it was, a string of messages with Mark. "Last night was amazing. Can't wait to see you again." He has no clue. Winky face. I stared at the screen, the words burning into my brain. My fists clenched, and my jaw tightened as I scrolled through more messages. There were photos, too. Ones I won't describe, but ones I'll never be able to forget. She wasn't just sneaking around with Mark. She was mocking me openly and shamelessly, like I was too stupid to figure it out. By the time I closed the laptop, I'd made up my mind. I wasn't going to confront her, not yet. This wasn't just about me anymore. It was about Ethan, and I needed to play this smart. I went back to bed, lying next to her as if nothing had happened, the fury bubbling beneath the surface. If she wanted to underestimate me, that was fine. It would make my next move all the more devastating. The days that followed were a whirlwind of planning. Judy carried on as though nothing had happened, smiling at Ethan at breakfast, complaining about her workload at dinner, and pretending to be the perfect wife. But I saw her for what she was now, a liar who thought she was untouchable. I started taking steps quietly, methodically. The first thing I did was visit a lawyer. I needed to understand my options before making any moves. Divorce was the obvious choice, but with Ethan involved, I had to be strategic. The lawyer, a no-nonsense woman named Barbara, listened intently as I laid out everything I'd discovered. "She's not just cheating," I said, my voice shaking with anger. "She's flaunting it, mocking me in her messages." Barbara leaned back in her chair, tapping her pen against the desk. "We can work with this," she said, "but you need to be smart. Gather more evidence. Build your case. And whatever you do, don't tip her off." That night, I installed a small camera in the living room, hidden behind a shelf of books. It wasn't hard. Judy was always glued to her phone, too distracted to notice me moving around. I also started backing up her emails and photos from her laptop. Each discovery felt like a fresh punch to the gut, but I knew I had to endure it if I wanted to protect Ethan. The turning point came a week later. I'd taken Ethan to the park after school, and when we got home, Judy wasn't there. She hadn't mentioned going out, but her car was gone. I checked the camera footage, my hands trembling as I fast-forwarded through the recording. There she was, dressed in that same revealing red dress she'd worn on Ethan's birthday. She paced around the living room, texting furiously, before finally walking out the door. Minutes later, Mark's car pulled into the driveway. He didn't even wait for her to get in. She practically leaped into the passenger seat. I saved the footage, my heart pounding. This wasn't just proof. It was a nail in the coffin of her lies. Later that night, she came home smelling of alcohol and cheap cologne, her lipstick smudged, her heels clicking loudly on the tile floor. I stayed silent, pretending to be asleep as she slipped into bed. But the next morning, I couldn't hold back anymore. "Late night?" I asked, my tone deliberately casual. "Work dinner," she said without missing a beat, pouring herself a cup of coffee. "With Mark?" I asked, watching her reaction closely. Her hand froze mid-pour, but she quickly recovered, turning to me with a scowl. "Don't start, Walter. I told you, I haven't spoken to him in years." I stared at her, the words hanging in the air. She was good, too good at lying, too good at pretending I was the problem. "Right?" I said, forcing a smile. "Must have been my imagination." She narrowed her eyes, suspicious for a moment, but then shrugged and walked away. That was when I knew I had her. She thought I was weak, clueless, the predictable Walter she'd mocked in her emails. But she was wrong. I had everything I needed to expose her for who she really was. And when the time came, I'd make sure she felt every ounce of the pain she'd inflicted. I wasn't going to confront her yet. Not until I could ensure my revenge would be absolute. The cracks in Judy's facade began to grow wider, but she still underestimated me. She thought I was the same naive husband she'd been playing for months. That worked in my favor. Every lie she told, every excuse she made, I let her think she got away with it. All the while, I was quietly stacking the deck against her. One night, I decided to test her. After dinner, I told her I had a late meeting at work and wouldn't be back until after midnight. Her face lit up, just for a split second, before she quickly masked it with a fake frown of concern. "Another late night?" she said, barely hiding her sarcasm. "You've been working so hard, Walter. Don't burn yourself out." I nodded, playing along. "I'll be fine. Just some extra paperwork." I left the house at 8, parked my car a few blocks away, and walked back through a neighbor's yard to watch our house from the shadows. Sure enough, at 9, Mark's car pulled up. She practically ran out the door to meet him, laughing as she climbed into the passenger seat. I followed them. They went to a bar on the edge of town, the kind of place where nobody asks questions and the lights are dim enough to hide anything. I stayed in my car, parked across the street, watching as they flirted openly, touching each other like they hadn't a care in the world. At one point, Mark leaned in close, whispering something that made Judy throw her head back in laughter. It was the same laugh she used to save for me, back when she still cared or pretended to. I clenched the steering wheel, forcing myself to stay calm. This wasn't the time to confront her. Not here, not yet. When they finally left the bar, I followed them to a cheap motel a few miles away. They didn't even bother being discreet. I watched as they disappeared into a room, and that's when I decided I had enough. I snapped a few photos of Mark's car in the parking lot and the motel sign, then drove home. The camera in the living room would catch her sneaking back in, giving me a perfect timeline of her betrayal. The next morning, she acted as if nothing had happened. She even kissed me on the cheek as I poured her coffee. "Did your meeting go okay?" she asked, her tone sickly sweet. "It went fine," I said, forcing a smile. "How about you? Quiet night?" "Yeah," she said with a shrug. "Just relaxed and watched some TV." I almost laughed at how easily the lie rolled off her tongue. Later that day, I called Barbara, my lawyer, and gave her the update. "I have photos, emails, video footage. It's airtight," I said. "Good," Barbara replied. "Now we move to phase 2. But remember, Walter, you can't tip her off. Not yet. Let her dig herself deeper." The waiting was the hardest part. Knowing what she was doing, watching her act like the perfect wife and mother, it was infuriating. But I kept my cool, focusing on Ethan. Then came the first unexpected twist. One afternoon, Judy got a call while we were sitting in the living room. She stepped outside to take it, her voice dropping to a whisper. I quietly opened the window just enough to hear her. "You can't call me like this," she hissed. "He'll hear you." There was a pause. Then her voice dropped even lower. "I told you, Mark, we have to be careful. He's not as clueless as you think. Just stick to the plan." Plan? My mind raced. This wasn't just an affair. There was something bigger happening here. Something I hadn't anticipated. I closed the window and sat back down, pretending to read the paper when she came back inside. She gave me a tight smile, her eyes darting around the room like she was looking for something or someone. For the first time, I felt a flicker of unease. What was she planning? And why did I get the feeling it wasn't just about cheating anymore? Judy's whispered conversation lingered in my mind like a shadow I couldn't shake. Stick to the plan. What plan? And why did it feel like I was being set up for something far worse than betrayal? The tension between us became almost palpable. She was still playing the role of the doting wife, but now I noticed the subtle shifts, her restless eyes, her sudden silences when I walked into a room, and the way she'd leave the house for hours with flimsy excuses. I decided to dig deeper. That evening, after she left for another yoga class, I grabbed her laptop. It wasn't locked this time, almost as if she thought she didn't need to bother anymore. A mistake. Her emails were a goldmine. Amid the flirtatious exchanges with Mark, I found something far more chilling. An email chain, buried under her work folder, titled Next Steps. The messages were short but damning. Mark, when will it be ready? We can't risk any delays. You're sure he's not suspicious? Judy, he's oblivious. I'll get it done this weekend. Mark, good. Once we have the account, it's game over for him. I stared at the screen, my blood running cold. The account? What were they talking about? Money? I kept digging and finally pieced it together. Judy had been siphoning money from our joint account into a hidden one she'd set up with Mark. Over the past year, thousands of dollars had vanished. Money I'd assumed was being spent on bills, groceries, or Ethan's school expenses. She wasn't just cheating on me. She was robbing me blind. The realization hit me like a freight train. Judy wasn't just planning to leave me for Mark. She was planning to leave me with nothing. But then I found something even worse. A folder labeled Contingency. Inside were scanned documents. A fake lease agreement with Mark's name. A forged letter of resignation supposedly signed by me. And, worst of all, a draft custody petition. She was planning to take Ethan. My hands trembled as I stared at the screen. This wasn't just about revenge or lust. This was about destroying my life and taking away the one thing that mattered most to me. That night, I barely slept. I lay awake, running through every possibility, every counter-move. By morning, I had a plan of my own. The first thing I did was visit the bank. I pulled every remaining dollar from our joint account and transferred it into a new one under my name alone. Next, I contacted Barbara, laying out everything I'd uncovered. Walter, this is no longer just about a divorce, she said, her tone grim. You're dealing with fraud, financial theft, and potential parental alienation. We need to act fast. We drafted an emergency motion to freeze all accounts tied to Judy and prepared a formal custody petition of my own. When I got home, Judy was already there, sitting on the couch with her arms crossed. Her expression was a mix of annoyance and suspicion. Where were you? She asked, her voice clipped. Errands, I said casually, hanging up my jacket. Why? Miss me? She didn't laugh. Instead, she got up and walked toward me, her eyes narrowing. You've been acting strange, Walter. Like you're hiding something. The irony of her words almost made me laugh. Maybe I'm just tired, I said, brushing past her. Long week. But as I turned away, she grabbed my arm, her nails digging into my skin. You're lying, she hissed. I can tell. I yanked my arm free and looked her dead in the eye. Funny. I was about to say the same thing about you. Her face flickered with something I hadn't seen before. Fear. For the first time, I saw the cracks in her confidence. She was starting to realize I wasn't as clueless as she thought. But what neither of us realized was that things were about to escalate far beyond anything either of us had planned. The next day, everything spiraled faster than I anticipated. Judy must have sensed something was off because she started acting even more erratic. She was glued to her phone, constantly texting and making hushed phone calls in the backyard, away from the windows. I could tell she was scrambling. Whatever plan she had was starting to unravel. That evening, as I was putting Ethan to bed, I overheard her on another call. Her voice was sharp, frantic. No, Mark, we need to do it now. He's acting weird, and I think he's onto us. There was a pause, and then quieter. Just meet me tomorrow, and we'll figure it out. But we have to move fast before he does something stupid. I tucked Ethan in and kissed his forehead, feeling my chest tighten. I couldn't let her manipulate this any further. I couldn't let her destroy our lives. The next morning, I pretended to head to work as usual, but instead, I parked a block away and waited. Sure enough, at 10, Mark pulled into the driveway. Judy climbed into his car with a large duffel bag, her face set in determination. I followed them again, but this time they didn't go to the usual places. Instead, they drove across town to a sleek office building I didn't recognize. They parked in the back and walked inside, Judy clutching the bag tightly. Curiosity burned in my gut. What the hell were they doing here? I waited for 10 minutes before deciding to take a risk. I got out of my car and walked toward the building, keeping my head low. Through the glass doors, I saw them at the reception desk, talking to a man in a suit. Judy handed him the bag, and Mark gestured toward a briefcase on the desk. I quickly stepped back before they could notice me, my heart racing. This wasn't just an affair or petty theft. Whatever they were doing, it was bigger than I'd thought. That evening, I called Barbara. "I think they're laundering money," I said, recounting what I'd seen. "Or something just as illegal. There's a duffel bag, a briefcase, and a whole lot of secrecy." Barbara was quiet for a moment. "Walter, this is beyond a divorce now. You need to go to the authorities." As much as I hated the idea, she was right. I needed help to take them down. But before I could act, Judy made her next move. That night, after Ethan was asleep, she confronted me in the kitchen. "Walter," she said, her tone icy. "I know what you're doing." I played dumb. "What are you talking about?" "Don't insult me," she snapped. "You've been snooping, haven't you? Checking my emails, following me. What's your endgame here?" I leaned against the counter, keeping my face neutral. "Maybe I just don't like being lied to, Judy. Maybe I'm tired of the secrets and the games." Her eyes narrowed, and for a moment, I thought she might crack. But then she laughed, that sharp, mocking laugh that made my blood boil. "You're pathetic," she said, stepping closer. "Do you really think you can stop me? Mark and I are smarter than you. We've planned for everything." "Everything?" I asked, raising an eyebrow. "Like me draining the joint account? Like me freezing your assets?" Her face fell just for a second before she recovered. "It doesn't matter. I have backups. And when this is all over, you'll have nothing. No money, no house, and no Ethan." That was the moment I snapped. "You're not taking him," I said, my voice steady but laced with fury. "You can have Mark. You can have your secrets. But you're not getting our son." She smirked, leaning in close. "Watch me." She turned and walked away, leaving me standing there, my fists clenched and my mind racing. She thought she'd won. She thought she was untouchable. But she had no idea what was coming next. The next morning, I put the final phase of my plan into motion. Judy was gone before I woke up, no doubt meeting with Mark again. She hadn't even bothered to leave a note or an excuse. It was as if she didn't care that her lies were crumbling around her. I made 2 phone calls. The first was to Barbara. "It's time," I told her. "Are you sure?" she asked, her voice steady but cautious. "I've never been surer of anything in my life." "Do it." The second call was to the local police. I laid out everything: her fraudulent financial activity, the secret meetings, and my suspicion that they were involved in something far beyond an affair. They didn't seem particularly surprised. It turns out Mark had a history, and they'd been looking for an excuse to investigate him further. By noon, I was sitting in my car outside the sleek office building they'd visited the day before, waiting. Sure enough, Mark's car pulled in. Judy climbed out, carrying the same duffel bag as before. They disappeared inside, oblivious to the fact that I'd tipped off the authorities. 15 minutes later, 2 unmarked police cars rolled into the lot. I watched from a distance as plainclothes officers entered the building. Time seemed to stretch, my heartbeat pounding in my ears. Then chaos erupted. Mark was the first to emerge, flanked by officers, his hands cuffed behind his back. He was shouting something about a misunderstanding, but no one was listening. Moments later, Judy followed, her face pale and her hands shackled. She wasn't shouting. She wasn't even fighting. She looked stunned, like the reality of her situation had finally sunk in. I didn't feel triumphant as I watched them get loaded into the back of the police cars. I felt relief. For the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe again. Later that afternoon, Barbara called me with an update. "They found everything," she said. "The fake accounts, the money transfers, the documents. Mark's in deep, and so is Judy. They're both looking at serious charges." "And Ethan?" I asked. "Judy has no leg to stand on in a custody battle now," she said. "You'll have full custody by the end of the month." It was the news I'd been waiting for, but I knew the fight wasn't over yet. When Judy got out, and she would eventually, I'd have to be ready for whatever game she tried to play next. That night, Ethan and I had dinner together, just the 2 of us. He was too young to understand what was happening, but I promised myself he'd never have to live in the shadow of his mother's betrayal. As I tucked him into bed, he looked up at me with those innocent eyes and said, Is Mommy coming back soon? I paused, my throat tightening. Not for a while, buddy, I said gently. But it's okay. I'm here. I'll always be here. He smiled, his trust in me unwavering, and closed his eyes. And as I sat in the quiet of the house that night, I finally let myself feel the weight of it all. The betrayal, the lies, the chaos. None of it mattered anymore, because now I had what truly mattered. I had Ethan, and I had the chance to rebuild our lives. Judy thought she was smarter, thought she'd won. But in the end, she was the one who lost everything. 2 days later, the fallout from Judy's arrest began to ripple through our lives. The phone calls started early that morning. Her sister, her friends, even Megan, the one who had covered for her so many times before. Walter, Megan said when I finally picked up, her voice strained. What's going on? Judy's in jail? What did you do? What did I do? I snapped, my patience already worn thin. Maybe ask Judy what she did. She's the one who dragged Mark into our lives, stole money from her own family, and put Ethan in the middle of all this. Megan stammered, trying to find a defense, but I wasn't interested in hearing it. I hung up before she could say anything else. I had no time for her guilt now that Judy's house of cards had collapsed. That afternoon, Barbara called with an update. You're going to want to sit down for this, she said. What is it? I asked, my stomach tightening. Mark's rolling over on her. He's claiming that everything, the money, the fraud, the entire scheme was Judy's idea. I exhaled slowly, feeling a mix of vindication and disbelief. And they believe him? They're investigating, Barbara said. But the evidence against her is overwhelming. Mark's playing the poor fool routine, but it's clear they were partners in crime. Still, Judy's facing heavier charges than we initially thought. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the ceiling. This wasn't just about Mark and Judy's betrayal anymore. This was about justice. Later that evening, I sat down with Ethan to go over his schoolwork. It was a simple task, but it reminded me of what was truly at stake. Judy had gambled everything. Her family, her freedom, and lost. But I still had Ethan, and I wasn't going to let her drag him down with her. Then came the knock at the door. I froze, my pulse quickening. When I opened it, I wasn't sure what to expect. Another angry relative, maybe? But instead, it was Judy's mother, Susan. She looked tired, her face etched with worry. Can I come in? She asked, her voice softer than I'd ever heard it. I hesitated but eventually stepped aside. Ethan's upstairs, I said, crossing my arms. If you're here to fight, I'm not in the mood. Susan shook her head. I'm not here to fight, Walter. I need to understand. How did it come to this? Her words caught me off guard. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. I think you know how, I said, my tone cold. Judy's been lying and scheming for months. Years, probably. This isn't new behavior. Susan looked down, her hands trembling. I knew she wasn't happy, she admitted. But I didn't know it had gone this far. I didn't know she could destroy her own family? I finished for her. She flinched but nodded. For a brief moment, the room was silent. Then Susan looked up at me, her eyes filled with guilt. If there's anything I can do to help, Walter, please tell me. I want to make this right for Ethan. I didn't trust her completely, but I could see the sincerity in her eyes. Maybe she was trying to atone for her own mistakes, for turning a blind eye to Judy's behavior for so long. I'll let you see Ethan, I said finally, but under my rules. If you want to be in his life, it's on my terms now. No excuses, no lies. Susan nodded, tears streaming down her face. Thank you, Walter. I'll do whatever it takes. As she left, I couldn't help but wonder if this was just another layer of manipulation. Or if, for once, someone in Judy's orbit was finally ready to take responsibility. One thing was certain, though, Judy had underestimated me, and now the walls she built to hide her lies were crashing down. Piece by piece, I was taking back control. The next morning, everything escalated again. I was in the middle of making breakfast for Ethan when my phone buzzed with an unknown number. Normally, I would have ignored it, but something told me to pick up. Walter, a man's voice said, tense and hurried. This is Detective Harris. I've been assigned to the case involving Judy and Mark. Detective, I said cautiously, setting the spatula down. "What's going on?" "We executed a search warrant at Mark's apartment," he said, his tone grim. "We found documents and correspondence that suggest Judy was planning something even more concerning. It's not just financial fraud. There's evidence she and Mark were preparing to leave the country." The floor seemed to tilt under me. What? She'd withdrawn a substantial amount of cash recently, and they had fake passports prepared. One for her, one for Mark, and... He paused, and I could hear the hesitation in his voice. "And what?" I demanded, my grip tightening on the phone. "One for your son, Ethan." For a moment, I couldn't breathe. The air was sucked from my lungs, and I felt like I was drowning in my own fury. "She was going to take him?" "It looks that way," Detective Harris said. "We don't have all the details yet, but it's clear they were planning to disappear soon. It's good we caught this when we did." I managed to thank him and hung up, but my hands were shaking as I set the phone down. My heart raced as I looked over at Ethan, happily munching on his pancakes, blissfully unaware of how close he'd come to being ripped away from me. The thought of Judy dragging him into her twisted games, taking him away from everything he knew, filled me with a rage I'd never felt before. She wasn't just trying to destroy me. She was willing to destroy Ethan's life, too. By the time Judy called me from jail that afternoon, I was ready. "Walter," she said, her voice dripping with false innocence. "This is ridiculous. You have to help me get out of here. They're blowing this whole thing out of proportion." I clenched my jaw, my anger simmering just below the surface. "Help you?" I said, my voice cold. "Why would I do that, Judy? You've lied to me, stolen from me, and now I find out you were planning to take Ethan and run." Her fake innocence shattered in an instant. "You don't understand," she snapped. "I was trying to protect him. From you. From me," I barked, my voice rising. "You were going to drag him halfway across the world with Mark? A criminal? And I'm the problem?" She started to argue, but I cut her off. "You lost, Judy. It's over. You gambled with everything, and now you've got nothing. You won't see Ethan again, not after this." "You can't do that," she screamed. "I'm his mother." "A mother?" I hissed. "A mother doesn't scheme to kidnap her own son and run off with her lover. You've burned every bridge, Judy. Don't call me again." I hung up, my hands trembling with adrenaline. Over the next week, things began to stabilize. The custody petition I filed was expedited due to the severity of the situation, and Judy's parental rights were suspended pending the outcome of her trial. Barbara assured me that with the evidence we had, it was unlikely she'd ever regain custody. But even as the dust settled, I couldn't shake the lingering sense of betrayal. Judy had almost succeeded in ripping my life apart. And for what? Greed? Power? Or was it just her warped idea of freedom? Whatever her reasons, one thing was clear. She was out of moves, and I wasn't going to let her drag me or Ethan down with her ever again. For the first time in months, I felt like I could finally see a future for us. A future free of Judy's lies. After the court hearing, things started to settle into a new normal. Ethan and I quickly adapted to life without Judy's chaos. At first, it felt surreal. No more late-night arguments, no more lies or manipulations. The house was quieter, lighter, almost peaceful. I threw myself into rebuilding our lives. Ethan thrived in the stability, his laughter filling the spaces Judy's absence had left behind. I focused on my work, my time with Ethan, and creating the kind of home where he could feel safe and loved. Judy, meanwhile, faded into the background. News of her sentencing spread fast, but as time passed, fewer people mentioned her. Occasionally, I'd get a stray question, "Have you heard from Judy?" But I'd brush it off. For me, she was a closed chapter. Then, about 2 years later, a letter arrived in the mail. It was from Judy. "Walter, I know you hate me, but I need to say this. I miss Ethan. I've had a lot of time to think about my mistakes, and I want to make things right. I'm working on getting my life back together. Please don't shut me out forever." I didn't respond. I didn't trust her words. She had a history of manipulation, and I wasn't going to let her back into Ethan's life just because she claimed to have changed. Time passed, and by the 3rd year I barely thought of her. Ethan and I had built a solid routine, and the scars she left behind had started to heal. Life was steady, even happy, but peace never lasts forever. One evening, as I was helping Ethan with his homework, there was a knock at the door. It was strange. No one usually visited unannounced. I told Ethan to stay put and went to answer it. When I opened the door, there she was, Judy, standing on the porch with a smug smile and a child in her arms. The sight of her hit me like a punch to the gut. She looked different, older, thinner, but her confidence was unmistakable. "Walter," she said, her tone dripping with satisfaction. "We need to talk." I couldn't find my voice. My eyes flicked to the child she was holding, a toddler with soft curls and big brown eyes. "This is your daughter," she said, holding up a folded piece of paper. "And here's the DNA test to prove it." My blood ran cold. 3 years of silence, and now she was back, bringing chaos with her, just like she always did. "You owe us everything now," she said, smirking as she stepped closer. It was like the floor had disappeared beneath me. But one thing was clear. Judy wasn't done trying to ruin my life. I stood frozen in the doorway, staring at Judy and the child she claimed was mine. My mind raced, a flood of disbelief, anger, and suspicion crashing over me. Ethan peeked around the corner, his curious eyes breaking me out of my stunned silence. "Go to your room, buddy," I said softly. "I'll be there in a minute." Ethan hesitated but obeyed, disappearing up the stairs. I stepped onto the porch and closed the door behind me, keeping my voice low and controlled. "What the hell are you doing here, Judy?" She smirked, holding the toddler closer. "I told you, this is your daughter, Walter. Her name is Lily. She's 2 years old. And this," she thrust the folded paper into my hand, "is the proof." I unfolded it, my hands shaking. The paper looked official, a DNA test with my name listed as the father. But something about it didn't sit right. "This doesn't prove anything," I said, shoving it back at her. "Why now? Why after 3 years?" "Because I was waiting for the right time," she said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "You didn't think I'd forget about you, did you? About Ethan? About everything you owe me?" "Owe you?" I barked, my anger bubbling to the surface. "I owe you nothing, Judy. You destroyed this family. You stole from me. You almost took Ethan from me. And now you show up with a child and expect me to believe your lies again." Her smile faltered for a moment, but then she straightened, her eyes flashing with defiance. "Think what you want, Walter, but Lily is yours. And now you're going to take responsibility for her." I laughed bitterly, shaking my head. "Not a chance. You've lied too many times, Judy. I'll get my own test. And until I know the truth, you're not stepping 1 foot into my house." Her face twisted with fury. "You always think you're so righteous, don't you? Well, let me tell you something, Walter, you don't get a choice. The courts will force you to pay once they see that test. Then I guess I'll see you in court." I shot back. I stepped back inside and locked the door, leaving her standing on the porch. My heart was pounding, my thoughts spinning out of control. If Lily was mine, what would that mean for Ethan? For the life we'd rebuilt? And if she wasn't, how far was Judy willing to go to drag me back into her web? Over the next few weeks, I worked with Barbara to arrange an independent DNA test. Judy fought it, of course, dragging out the process and trying to guilt me into accepting her claims. But I stood firm, determined to uncover the truth. When the results finally came in, they confirmed what I'd suspected all along. Lily wasn't mine. I confronted Judy with the results in court, watching as her confidence crumbled for the first time. She tried to argue, to deflect, but the evidence was undeniable. The judge dismissed her claims, warning her against further attempts to manipulate the system. Outside the courthouse, Judy cornered me one last time. Her face was a mask of anger and desperation. "You think you've won, don't you?" she spat. "But you'll always be a coward, Walter. You couldn't handle me, and now you're too scared to face the truth." "No, Judy," I said, my voice calm and steady. "I'm not scared anymore. You don't control me, and you never will again." As she stormed off, I felt a sense of finality wash over me. For the first time, I knew she was truly out of my life. That evening, I sat with Ethan in the backyard, watching him chase fireflies under the fading light. The storm Judy had brought into our lives was finally over, and for the first time in years, I felt free. I didn't owe her anything, but I owed Ethan everything. and I wasn't going to let anyone take that from me ever again. The screen flickered. I leaned closer to the monitor, my pulse hammering, sweat slick on my palms. There it was, her face, my wife Emily, smiling that sly, knowing smile. And across from her sat him, Raymond, her stepfather. The grainy footage stuttered for a second before catching up. It was the kitchen cam from months ago. My breath hitched as I unmuted the file. Their voices came through, clear as a bell. "The look on his face will be priceless," Raymond said, his voice low, nearly gleeful. Emily giggled like a schoolgirl. My wife, my partner, laughing. "When do you think we should tell him?" she teased, eyes glinting with something I didn't recognize, or maybe something I had refused to see. "The party," Raymond replied without missing a beat. He leaned back in his chair, smirking. "It'll be perfect, right in front of everyone." I pressed pause, bile rising in my throat. The sound of my kids' voices floated faintly in the background, playing somewhere out of frame. I sat there, staring at the frozen screen, feeling as if someone had punched me in the gut. The party, right in front of everyone. The room around me shrank. My desk, my chair, the four walls I'd built my life in. It all blurred as those words looped over and over in my mind. Emily and her stepfather, sitting together, whispering like conspirators plotting my demise. I skipped forward in the footage, fast-forwarded to a new day, another meeting. The angle was different this time, the dining room cam, capturing the two of them seated side by side. A folder lay on the table between them. My hands shook as I watched. Raymond tapped the folder twice and slid it toward her. Emily smirked, opening it. My chest tightened as I caught a glimpse of its contents. Papers, charts, pictures. But the resolution wasn't clear enough to see what they were. My wife picked up one sheet and tilted her head. "Do you think the kids will care when they find out?" she asked, her tone light. "Not at first," Raymond said, his smile thin and cruel. "But they'll come around. They always do. He's not half the man he pretends to be." A soft laugh bubbled up from Emily, and then she turned to the camera. For a split second, her eyes seemed to look right at me. My blood went cold. I hit pause again. My ears rang with silence. What the hell was this? My marriage, my family, my entire life. Something dark was writhing beneath it all. I didn't understand yet, but I knew one thing for certain. I was the target. I dragged the footage slider to the next file. It was late at night in the living room. The kids were asleep. Emily and Raymond sat on the couch, wine glasses in hand. Their voices were softer this time, almost intimate. "We've waited long enough," Raymond said, swirling his glass. "He deserves to know the truth. He's been living a lie." Emily bit her lip and nodded. "I'll get the DNA tests done before the party. I want the timing to be dramatic." DNA tests. Everything inside me stopped. DNA. My kids. My mind reeled, pieces clicking together like shattered glass reforming in reverse. My pulse raced as I stared at the frozen image of my wife's satisfied expression. What the hell were they planning? I couldn't breathe, couldn't move. My kids weren't mine? What was happening? I rewound, replayed, desperate for more answers. The harder I looked, the more fragmented my world became. Then came the final straw. A voice crackled through the next file. Raymond, leaning close to Emily, as if sharing a secret meant only for her. "Once he's humiliated in front of everyone, once the kids see him for what he is." He paused, savoring the thought. "He'll be nothing. A joke." I slammed my fist on the desk, the sharp pain snapping me back. A joke. That's what they thought of me. My wife, her stepfather, smiling, drinking, planning my ruin. But they didn't know I had this. They didn't know I'd seen everything. My eyes flicked to the calendar on the wall. The party was in 5 days. 5 days to uncover everything. 5 days to destroy their plan. They wanted a spectacle? They'd get one. But it wouldn't be the one they were hoping for. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in front of my monitor, replaying those videos over and over until my eyes burned. My wife and her stepfather. 2 people I thought I knew. Plotting something so vile, so intricate, I couldn't wrap my head around it. I needed answers. What truth were they talking about? DNA tests? What the hell did Raymond mean when he said the kids would see me for what I really am? It was like a shadow creeping up behind me. Something I couldn't see yet, but I knew it was there. By morning, I was shaking with exhaustion, my thoughts tangled. My kids, Luke and Ava, were at the table munching on cereal when Emily breezed into the kitchen like nothing was wrong. Her smile was practiced, flawless, like a performer hitting her cue. "Morning, Han," she said, kissing me on the cheek. I could smell lavender in her hair, the same scent she'd worn since we first met. Familiar, but now tainted. Couldn't even look at her. "Morning," I muttered, my voice hoarse. "Late night?" she asked casually, pouring coffee into her favorite mug. Her tone, calm, sweet, made my skin crawl. I knew what she really was now, didn't I? Behind that perfect wife mask was someone who could laugh at me, mock me, ruin me, right under my nose. She sat down across from me, sipping her coffee, watching me. Her eyes narrowed slightly, as though she could sense something had shifted. "You're quiet," she said, tilting her head. "Everything okay?" I almost told her right then and there, almost slammed my hand on the table, grabbed her by the shoulders, and screamed, "Whose kids are they? What the hell are you planning?" But I couldn't, not yet. Instead, I forced a smile, stiff and hollow. "Just work. Deadlines." She nodded and went back to scrolling through her phone, none the wiser. But in my mind, a clock was ticking. 5 days to the party. I had to be smart. If I made one wrong move, they'd know I was onto them. That night, I met Greg. Greg was the only person I trusted. A childhood friend, an IT guy who could break into just about anything with a keyboard and a couple of Red Bulls. If anyone could dig deeper into those recordings, it was him. We sat in his garage, surrounded by old monitors and blinking server lights. I handed him the flash drive with the recovered files, and Greg slid it into his laptop without asking questions. He knew better than to pry. He could see the look in my eyes. "What are we looking for?" he finally asked, breaking the silence. "Everything," I said through gritted teeth. "Every file, every frame. I need to know what's on here that I missed." Greg started running recovery programs, tapping keys like a madman. The fan on his laptop whirred louder as lines of code flashed across the screen. I paced behind him, my pulse pounding in my ears. "Jesus, man," Greg muttered suddenly, freezing mid-keystroke. "What?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, he dragged one of the recovered video thumbnails to the center of the screen and hit play. It was new footage, a clip the system must have buried deeper than the others. Emily sat on the porch steps, her arms crossed. Raymond loomed over her, his face inches from hers. "You think he suspects anything?" Raymond growled, his voice dripping with venom. Emily exhaled sharply, annoyed. "If he did, he'd have confronted me already. You give him too much credit, Ray. He's too stupid to put 2 and 2 together." The rage that exploded in my chest made me nearly tear the monitor off the table. Greg grabbed my arm. "Hold it together, man." I sucked in a breath, gripping the edge of the desk so hard my knuckles went white. The video continued. "The party's the perfect time," Raymond said. "You get the DNA results by then and we'll lay it all out. Make him look like the fool he is. Let his kids see him crumble." Emily's lips curled into that same smile, the one that haunted me. "I just hope the kids won't hate me for it. But they deserve the truth, don't they?" The screen went black. Greg sat back, stunned. "What the hell, man? Is that your—" "Yes," I snapped. My hands trembled at my sides. "You need to confront her. This is—" "Not yet." Greg looked at me like I'd lost my mind. Maybe I had. But not completely. Not yet. If they wanted to blindside me at the party, I was going to turn the tables. Emily and Raymond thought they were pulling the strings, that I was too stupid, too blind to see what they were doing. But I saw it all. I straightened, feeling a new kind of clarity settle over me. The man they thought was weak was about to show them just how wrong they were. "I need you to recover everything," I said, my voice calm. "Every file, every shred of proof." Greg nodded, his expression serious. "You got it." As I walked out of that garage into the cold night air, I felt it. Something I hadn't felt in weeks. Control. They wanted to destroy me? Fine. Let's see how they like it when the whole family watches them burn. The next morning, I moved like a man underwater. Silent, deliberate, suffocating with every breath. Emily was already up, humming to herself in the kitchen while flipping pancakes. Pancakes, like it was any other day. like she wasn't orchestrating my humiliation, tearing apart the family I thought was mine. I sat down at the table, my eyes burning holes into her back as she placed a plate in front of me. "Eat up. Big day at work, right?" she said cheerfully. Her voice grated against my ears like nails on glass. Luke and Ava ran into the kitchen, giggling as they sat at the table. I turned to watch them, my kids. Or were they? My stomach twisted at the thought. I'd stayed up most of the night staring at their faces in old family photos, hunting for traces of him. Raymond's smirk. Raymond's eyes. Ava waved her hand in front of me, laughing. "Earth to Dad." I blinked, forcing a smile. "Morning, Princess." Emily shot me a glance. She knew something was off. Her eyes narrowed just a fraction before she hit it with another perfect smile. "What's wrong? You seem distracted." I met her gaze for the first time that morning, holding it longer than I should have. I didn't say a word. I let the silence hang there between us, like a blade. I called Greg from my car on the way to work. "Anything new?" I asked. My voice was tight, impatient. Greg sighed into the phone. "Yeah, found more files. One's a doozy. Sending it to you now." I pulled into the office parking lot, but I didn't get out. My phone buzzed. A new video file. I connected my earbuds and hit play. The video started in a dimly lit room, Raymond's living room. Emily sat on the armrest of his chair, her posture relaxed. Raymond was holding a stack of papers. "These are the results," he said, flipping through them. My gut clenched. Emily reached out and took the papers, smirking. "So it's official. He's been raising your kids this whole time." Raymond chuckled, a low, cruel sound that made my skin crawl. "All these years, thinking they were his. You couldn't write a better joke." Emily shook her head, laughing softly. "You think he'll cry? I hope he does. God. Ray. I can't stand the way he looks at me like I'm still his perfect little wife. He has no idea how much of a joke he is." I yanked the earbuds out so fast they nearly ripped in half. My vision blurred with rage. I slammed my fist against the steering wheel, the horn blaring through the empty lot. It was real. Everything was real. I sat there for what felt like hours, fists clenched so tight my nails dug into my palms. My wife and her stepfather had been laughing at me, mocking me for years, and now they had a plan to rip apart my life, piece by piece, in front of everyone I loved. That night I came home with a plan. The moment I stepped through the door, Emily greeted me with that same rehearsed warmth. "Hey, you're late. Everything okay?" "Yeah," I said, my voice flat. "Work ran over." She leaned in to kiss my cheek, but I turned my head, brushing past her. I could feel her watching me as I headed upstairs. I locked myself in my office, pulling out the folder Greg had given me. The videos, the recovered files, the DNA results, I had them all. My evidence. The truth. But there was one more thing I needed to confirm before I could bring them down. I pulled out my phone and dialed a number I hadn't called in years. A lawyer's office. "Good evening, Mr. Chambers," said a calm voice on the other end. "How can we help you?" "I need a meeting," I said, my voice low and steady. "Tomorrow. First thing." "Understood. What's the subject of the meeting?" I glanced at the screen, at the frozen frame of Emily laughing in Raymond's living room. "Divorce. And I want to discuss my options for DNA testing." When I walked back downstairs, the kids were in the living room watching cartoons. Emily sat on the couch with her legs curled under her, flipping through a magazine. She looked up at me, smiling. "You okay?" she asked sweetly, as if she cared. I met her eyes, studying her face. "Yeah," I said softly. "I'm great." I could feel the weight of what I knew pressing against my chest like a stone. But I didn't let it show. Not yet. Because when the time came, when everyone was watching, I'd be the one holding the knife. They wanted a show. I'd give them one. The house was silent as I stood in the doorway of my kids' room that night, watching them sleep. Luke's leg hung over the side of the bed, while Ava clutched her stuffed bunny like she had since she was 3. My throat tightened. I'd kissed their foreheads 1,000 times before, but tonight, I hesitated. Because what if they weren't mine? The rage returned, hot, simmering, begging to be unleashed, but I swallowed it down. Not yet, not yet. I turned, walked to my office, and locked the door behind me. I'd set the stage. Now it was time to bait the players. The next day, I put my plan into motion. I called Raymond. I hadn't spoken to him in weeks, and his voice oozed with faux concern the moment he picked up. Well, it's been a while. Everything okay, son? Couldn't be better, I said, my tone cool. Listen, Emily said you were helping organize the big family party. There was silence, just a second too long. I could picture his smug grin faltering. That's right, he replied slowly. Everything's coming together perfectly. Great, I said, leaning back in my chair. I was thinking, I want to make a speech, something to honor the family. Say a few words about everything we've built together. He chuckled, fake hollow. A speech? That's not really your style, is it? Maybe I'm feeling sentimental, I replied evenly. I just want to show my appreciation. After all, I owe you and Emily so much. I heard his hesitation, his brain whirring as he tried to figure out what I was playing at. Finally, he said, Of course. I think that's a great idea. Hook, set. That evening, Emily was already in the kitchen when I got home, chopping vegetables. Raymond called me today, she said casually, not looking up. I dropped my bag on the counter. Oh, she glanced at me from the corner of her eye. Said you wanted to make a speech at the party. Since when do you like making speeches? I shrugged, pouring myself a glass of water. It's a big event. I figured it's time I put in some effort. She watched me carefully, the knife pausing mid-slice. For a second, I thought she was going to push, ask more questions, prod for what I was really up to. But instead, she smiled and went back to chopping. That's sweet, she said. I smiled back. Let her think I was clueless. Let her think she still had the upper hand. The day before the party, Greg called. You're going to want to see this, he said, his voice clipped and serious. I drove straight to his place, heart pounding the entire way. When I walked in, Greg was sitting in front of his monitors, the glow from the screens lighting up his face. He didn't say anything, he just hit play. The footage started in a basement, Raymond's, from what I could tell. He was pacing, a glass of whiskey in hand, while Emily sat slouched in a chair. The audio crackled before clearing. He's getting too comfortable, Raymond grumbled. If he starts getting suspicious, this could blow up in our faces. Emily sighed, exasperated. He's too stupid, Ray. You're overthinking it. After the party, it's done. We tell him everything. The kids see who he really is, and we're free of him. Raymond stopped pacing and pointed at her. This isn't just about being free of him. This is about showing him he's nothing. He took everything from me. My daughter's loyalty, my respect. Do you know how humiliating it's been to watch him succeed while I'm left to rot? Emily smirked. You'll get your revenge. Just trust me. Raymond raised his glass. To the party. The screen froze on Emily's smirking face. Greg turned to me, his expression grave. This isn't just betrayal, man. This is war. I nodded, jaw clenched so tight it hurt. They think they're walking me to the gallows, I said quietly. But they're the ones who are screwed. The morning of the party, I woke up early. I'd barely slept, but I felt alive. Sharp, focused, like a hunter stalking its prey. I tucked the flash drive with the recordings into my pocket. My lawyer had already prepped everything. DNA results, legal documents, all lined up. Emily fluttered around the house like a queen on her throne, barking orders to the caterers, picking out her dress, fixing her makeup. Every smile she flashed me, every casual touch on my arm, made my skin crawl. By mid-afternoon, the house buzzed with the sound of guests arriving. I stood in the mirror, straightening my tie, breathing slowly. This was it. As I walked downstairs, I could hear Raymond's booming laughter over the hum of conversation. Emily was at his side, grinning like a teenager, her hand resting on his arm. I made my way through the crowd, shaking hands, smiling, pretending like I wasn't about to set the whole room on fire. When it was time, Emily clinked her glass. The room quieted, all eyes turning toward her. She beamed, like this was her moment. I just want to say how grateful I am to all of you for being here today, she began, her voice smooth and confident. We've always been a close family, and today is about celebrating the truth. I stepped forward. Actually, I said, cutting her off, I'd like to go first. Emily froze. Her smile faltered for half a second before she recovered. Oh, of course. Go ahead. I turned to face the room, my voice calm and even. Thank you all for coming today. There's something very important I want to share with you. It's about my wife, Emily, and Raymond. The color drained from Emily's face. Raymond straightened, his smile gone. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the flash drive. Let's start with a little video. The room went silent as I plugged it into the TV. I hit play, and then, their perfect world began to burn. The room fell into an unnatural silence as the video began to play. Faces turned toward the massive TV mounted on the wall. Emily's smile faded into something tight and unreadable. Raymond stiffened in his chair, a glass of whiskey frozen halfway to his lips. The footage lit up the screen. Emily and Raymond sitting in his dimly lit living room. Their voices, so clear and mocking, boomed through the speakers. After the party, it's done. We tell him everything. The kids see who he really is, and we're free of him. Gasps rippled through the crowd. I scanned the faces of the guests. Relatives, family friends, neighbors, watching their confusion morph into shock. Emily shot up from her seat, her heels clicking against the floor. "What the hell is this?" she demanded, her voice laced with panic. I didn't answer. The next clip began to play. Raymond's voice came next, louder, dripping with malice. "This isn't just about being free of him. This is about showing him he's nothing. He took everything from me. Do you know how humiliating it's been to watch him succeed?" Raymond's face on screen twisted into that smirk I'd come to hate. In the room, he was pale as a sheet, his fingers white-knuckling his whiskey glass. Emily spun toward me, eyes blazing. "Turn this off. Now." I ignored her, keeping my voice calm and steady. "You want to tell them, Emily? Or should I?" She advanced toward me, her face inches from mine, her whisper venomous. "Stop this. You're making a fool of yourself." I let out a cold, humorless laugh. "Me? Oh no, Emily. You two have been making a fool of me for years. And now everyone gets to see who the real jokes are." The final clip rolled. It was the one that broke everything apart. Emily's voice again, careless and cruel. "He's been raising your kids this whole time, Ray. Can you imagine his face when he finds out? I hope he cries." Someone dropped a glass, the shatter echoing like a gunshot. Raymond stood abruptly, his chair scraping loudly across the hardwood. "Enough. Turn this off." I hit pause, plunging the room back into silence. All eyes were on them now. People muttered under their breath, their gazes bouncing between Emily and Raymond like they'd seen ghosts. "You two have been planning this for how long?" I said, my voice steady despite the fire burning inside me. "Years? Decades? You sat here in this room and pretended to love me, pretended to be family. And all the while you were laughing at me behind my back, mocking me, plotting to destroy me." "Stop it!" Emily screamed, her face flushed red. "This isn't what it looks like, isn't it?" I shot back, turning to the guests. "You all heard it. You heard her admit it. The kids I raised, our kids, are Raymond's. All of this, my entire life, was built on a lie." The room erupted into chaos. Guests whispered frantically. A few women cried. Emily stumbled back, clutching her forehead as if trying to think of a way out. But there was no way out. Raymond stepped forward, his voice booming to regain control. "You're pathetic, you know that?" He pointed a trembling finger at me, but I could see it, the cracks in his armor. "You're twisting everything." "You? Twisting?" I cut him off, my voice sharp. "It's all right there, Ray. Your words, your plan, your envy. This was your game all along, wasn't it? I was successful, so you had to rip me apart. You couldn't stand seeing me happy, respected. So you dragged Emily into this sick game and made her your accomplice." "Shut up," he barked, but his voice shook. The guests watched him now, their horror growing. I turned to Emily, who had collapsed into a chair, her hands trembling. "And you," I said coldly, "you smiled in my face every single day, knowing the truth. You let me kiss you, hold you, while you were laughing behind my back." She lifted her head, tears streaking her face. "It's not like that. You don't understand." "Then explain it, Emily," I said, stepping closer. "Explain how you could let me believe they were mine. Explain how you could stand beside me and plot to ruin me in front of our children." She opened her mouth, but no words came out. For the first time, Emily had nothing to say. The silence was suffocating. I pulled the final nail from my pocket, the DNA test results, and tossed them onto the coffee table. For anyone who still doubts it, There it is. Black and white. Raymond paled. Emily's sobs broke through the quiet, echoing around the room. The guests' stares were daggers now, their judgment washing over the two of them like a tidal wave. I looked toward Luke and Ava, who stood frozen in the corner. Their young faces a mix of confusion and hurt. My heart ached for them, but I reminded myself they were victims, too. "This ends here," I said firmly, my voice carrying over the crowd. "I won't be humiliated. I won't be your puppet. You've spent years building this lie, but today—" I gestured toward the shocked faces of our family. "It comes crashing down." Emily's sobs grew louder. Raymond looked ready to explode, but he said nothing. He knew there was nothing left to say. I turned to the guests. "Enjoy the rest of your party. I'm done here." With that, I walked toward the door, the weight of years of betrayal lifting with every step. This wasn't over, not yet. But today I had won. They wanted me broken. I walked out whole. The door slammed behind me, the noise cutting through the murmurs and chaos of the room I'd left behind. I stood on the porch for a moment, breathing in the cold evening air, letting it sear my lungs. My hands shook, adrenaline still coursing through me, but there was no time to lose. This wasn't the end. It was just the first blow. From inside, I could hear Emily's muffled cries, Raymond's furious barking, and the hum of voices, shock, judgment, confusion, spreading like wildfire through the guests. Let them stew in it. Let the poison they'd brewed seep back into their lives. I walked to my car, my steps calm and deliberate. As I slid behind the wheel, my phone buzzed. "Greg, you do it?" he asked, voice tense but eager. "They're burning," I replied flatly, starting the engine. "But I'm not finished." The next morning, I sat across from my lawyer in a glass-walled office downtown. The man was a shark, gray suit, slicked hair, and a stare sharp enough to cut steel. "You're sure about this?" he asked, glancing at the DNA results I'd placed on his desk. "Do you see any doubt there?" I shot back, tapping the papers. He nodded, flipping through the file. "We'll file immediately. Divorce proceedings, financial protection, custody, everything. This gives us leverage. You've covered your bases well. What about the kids?" My voice cracked slightly. The lawyer's gaze softened. "They'll need to be told the truth eventually. But right now, you need to protect yourself first. I'll make sure Raymond's interference with your family is documented in full." "Good," I said, my tone hardening. "I want him exposed. Publicly. Legally. I don't care if he's a stepfather. He's a predator, and the whole town should know it." He smirked faintly. "Revenge is best served clean and cold. You're doing the right thing." By that afternoon, I was back at the house. Emily's car was in the driveway, parked crookedly, like she'd rushed inside. When I stepped through the door, the living room was a wreck. Pillows tossed, a shattered vase, the TV still frozen on the last damning frame of Raymond's face. I found Emily in the kitchen, pacing like a trapped animal. Her eyes were red, hair wild. When she saw me, she spun around, fury boiling over. "What the hell did you do?" she shrieked, advancing toward me. "Do you have any idea what you've caused? You ruined everything." "I ruined everything?" I scoffed, my voice ice cold. "No, Emily. I just shined a light on the rot you and Raymond spent years hiding. That's not my fault, that's yours." Her hands trembled at her sides, fists clenched. "The kids, Luke and Ava, they're upstairs crying because of you." My jaw tightened. Because of me? Or because their mother decided to betray their father with her own stepfather? "Don't twist this, Emily." She let out a bitter laugh, shaking her head. "You're pathetic. You can't stand that you're not some perfect hero, so you're blowing up our lives to make yourself feel better. That's what this is, isn't it? Some sick revenge fantasy." I stepped closer, my voice low, dangerous. "You blew up our lives the day you let Raymond into your bed. The day you let him poison you against me. Against us." Her mask cracked. Tears spilled over her cheeks, though they didn't move me anymore. "You'll regret this," she whispered. "You think you're strong, but you're not. You'll end up alone." I leaned in, meeting her tear-streaked gaze. "Better alone than surrounded by liars." She froze, her lip trembling, but I turned my back to her and started up the stairs. If she wanted to scream or sob or throw something, let her. I didn't care anymore. I found Luke and Ava in their room, sitting side by side on the floor. Ava clutched her stuffed bunny, her cheeks wet with tears. Luke looked up when I entered, his eyes a storm of confusion. "Dad?" he said quietly. I knelt down, forcing a calm I didn't feel. "Hey, bud. Mom said you're lying," he blurted. "She said you're trying to hurt us." The words hit me like a punch to the gut. I swallowed hard, nodding slowly. "I know this is confusing, and I'm sorry, but I promise you, I'm not trying to hurt you. I love you both. More than anything." Ava sniffled, curling tighter around her bunny. "What's going to happen to us?" I hesitated, my throat thick with emotion. "We're going to be okay," I said softly. "I'll make sure of it." Luke stared at me, his young mind struggling to make sense of something he didn't deserve to carry. "Is Grandpa Raymond bad?" I didn't answer. "Not yet. Just remember," I said instead, "I'm always on your side, no matter what." That evening, my lawyer called. "Everything's been filed. Custody, divorce, legal protections, you're covered. And I've already sent Raymond's files to the local press." "Good," I said, staring out the window into the darkness. Emily and Raymond had lit the match, believing they could control the fire. Instead, I was the one holding the torch now. I didn't care how much they screamed or how desperately they tried to claw their way out. They'd built their entire twisted scheme on lies, and I would burn it all to the ground. The real storm was coming. The house was suffocating. Emily paced the living room, her phone clutched in her trembling hands, whispering frantically to someone. Likely Raymond. I sat at the dining table, silent, staring at the divorce papers I'd left where she could see them. The bold letters "Petition for Divorce" stood out like a scar. I didn't move. I didn't speak. I wanted her to feel the walls closing in, the pressure building. I had spent years in the dark, a puppet in their hands. Now it was her turn to squirm. "You're making a mistake," she finally snapped, her voice raw. "You think this will fix anything? Do you think the kids will forgive you for destroying their family?" I looked up, meeting her bloodshot eyes with a calm that unsettled her. "I'm destroying it? Emily, I'm the only one telling them the truth." She flinched at the word, but before she could respond, the doorbell rang. We both froze. The sound echoed through the quiet house like a gunshot. Emily's face paled, and I knew why. The truth was spreading now, too fast for her to contain. I stood, walking calmly to the door while Emily stayed rooted to the spot. When I opened it, I wasn't surprised to find 2 police officers standing there, their expressions stern. Behind them stood Raymond, his face a mask of poorly hidden smugness. "Mr. Hale?" one officer asked. "Yes," I replied, voice steady. "We've received a complaint about harassment and intimidation. This man," the officer gestured to Raymond, "says you've been threatening him and your wife with false accusations." Emily appeared behind me, her voice rising in panic. "He's lying. He's lost his mind." I didn't blink. I didn't lose my cool. I'd expected this move. Raymond scrambling to regain control. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. "Officers, before you take his word for anything, you should see this." I unlocked the screen, scrolling to one of the recovered videos. I handed the phone to the lead officer. It was the clip of Raymond saying, "This isn't just about being free of him. This is about showing him he's nothing." The officer's expression shifted as he listened. His gaze flicked to Raymond, then back to me. "Where did you get this?" I took my phone back. "Surveillance cameras from my home. He and my wife deleted the files, but I had them recovered. There's more videos of them plotting to humiliate me, proof of their affair, and, most importantly, evidence of what they've done to my children." Emily gasped behind me, her voice trembling. "He's twisting everything. It's not what it sounds like." The officer ignored her, turning to Raymond. "Sir, I think you'd better come with us to answer some questions." Raymond's face turned crimson. "What? This is ridiculous. He's lying." "I have proof," I said coldly, stepping closer. "Do you? Or is all you've got a pathetic story about being the victim?" Raymond's mouth opened and closed, but no words came. For the first time, he looked small, his confidence stripped away. "Let's go," the officer said, grabbing Raymond's arm. As they escorted him to the patrol car, Emily crumbled to the floor, sobbing. She knew the dam had broken. That night, the house was eerily quiet. I sat alone in the living room, the weight of everything pressing down on me. For years, they treated me like a fool, a joke. But now the tide had turned. My phone buzzed. It was Greg. "You see the news?" he asked. I grabbed the remote and turned on the TV. A local station had picked up the story. Respected community member under investigation for family scandal. A picture of Raymond flashed on the screen, followed by a blurred photo of Emily. "Looks like he's not the golden boy anymore," Greg said. I didn't smile. Not yet. It's a start. The next morning, I sat Luke and Ava down at the kitchen table. They looked at me with wide, fearful eyes, as if they expected me to yell or punish them for something they didn't do. I took a deep breath. "There's something we need to talk about." Luke spoke first, his voice small. "Is it about Grandpa Raymond?" I nodded slowly. "Yes, I'm going to tell you the truth. It's going to hurt, and it's going to be confusing, but you deserve to know." Ava clutched her bunny tighter. "What did he do?" I looked at both of them, forcing myself to hold back the anger boiling inside me. "He lied to us. To me. He's not a good person, and he's done things that hurt this family. I'm sorry I couldn't protect you from it sooner, but I promise you, I'm fixing it now." Luke stared at the table, his jaw tight. "Is that why Mom's crying so much?" I nodded again. "Your mom made mistakes too, but this isn't your fault. None of this is." Ava's voice trembled. "What's going to happen now?" I reached across the table, squeezing both of their hands. "We're going to be okay. I promise." As I said it, I realized it was the first time in months that I truly believed it. This wasn't over. Raymond and Emily would face more consequences, publicly, legally, and personally. But the first cracks had formed, and the truth had begun to bleed through. For now, that was enough. The real reckoning was still coming. The storm hit 2 days later. Not a literal one, this was worse. It started with whispers, spread like a fire through the neighborhood, and by the end of the week, Raymond's name was poison. I sat at my desk in the office, staring at my phone as a string of messages from family members rolled in. "Is this true? About Raymond? How could Emily let this happen? What about the kids? Are you okay?" Raymond's face was now plastered across every local news outlet. The story had snowballed. What began as a scandal turned into a reckoning. Neighbors, family friends, old colleagues. They all had something to say, and nobody was on his side. My lawyer had been clear. The more public their disgrace, the better our position in court. Keep your head down, don't respond to anyone, and let them bury themselves. So I waited. By noon, the call came. "Emily." I stared at the screen for a moment before answering. "What?" I said flatly. Her voice was hoarse, almost unrecognizable. "You've ruined us." "No, you ruined you," I shot back. "Don't pin this on me. You're destroying the kids' lives," she cried. "Do you think they'll forgive you for this?" "Forgive me?" I barked a bitter laugh. "I didn't do this, Emily. You and Raymond did. You betrayed me. You betrayed them. And for what? So you could play your little mind games while he fed his pathetic ego." She was silent for a moment. When she spoke again, her voice dropped to a venomous whisper. "He's going to fight back. You think you've won, but you don't know him like I do." "Good," I said coolly. "Let him fight. I've got nothing to hide, and he's already lost everything." I ended the call before she could say another word. Later that day, Greg called. "You're going to want to see this," he said, the same phrase he always used when things escalated. "What now?" "Check the news." I opened my laptop and pulled up the local news site. The headline punched me in the gut. "Respected community leader accused of predatory behavior and family betrayal." The article recounted the affair, the manipulation, the DNA results, everything. Someone had leaked the files I gave my lawyer. Whether it was deliberate or accidental didn't matter. The damage was done. There was even an anonymous quote. "He always played the perfect family man, but it was an act. The truth is finally out." Raymond's carefully crafted mask had shattered, and now the pieces were on full display for everyone to see. That evening, I was sitting on the couch, sipping whiskey, when there was a pounding at the door. I knew who it was before I even opened it. Raymond stood on the porch, drenched in sweat, his face twisted in rage. "You bastard," he spat, lunging toward me. I stepped back, slamming the door against his shoulder. "What do you want, Raymond? You think you can ruin me and get away with it?" His voice shook as he shoved his way inside. "You think this is over? It's already over." I said calmly, folding my arms. The world knows what you are now. You can't hide it. You can't spin it. You're done. He jabbed a finger in my face, his hand trembling. You think this makes you a hero? You've destroyed everything. My family. Your family? I cut him off, my voice ice cold. You destroyed that the moment you crawled into bed with your own stepdaughter and decided to play God with my life. Don't blame me because your little empire is burning. Raymond's face turned red, veins bulging in his neck. He looked ready to swing at me, but I didn't flinch. Instead, I smiled. A calm, cruel smile I knew would cut him deeper than any punch. You wanted to humiliate me, Raymond. You wanted to tear me down in front of my kids, my family, my friends. But look at you now. Everyone sees you for what you really are. For the first time, I saw it. The fight draining from his eyes. He knew it was over. Get out of my house, I said quietly. He hesitated, glaring at me, but there was nothing left for him to say. With a strangled grunt, he turned and stormed out, slamming the door so hard the walls shook. I let out a long breath and sat back down, the tension in my shoulders finally starting to ease. The next morning, Emily moved out. She didn't say goodbye, didn't look me in the eye. A moving truck idled in the driveway as she loaded box after box into the back. Luke and Ava stood beside me on the porch, watching silently. Where's Mom going? Ava asked softly. I rested a hand on her shoulder. She needs some time away. Is this our fault? Luke asked, his voice barely above a whisper. I crouched down, looking him in the eye. No, this is not your fault. None of it is. You're good kids, and I'll always be here for you. Always. He nodded, biting his lip, trying not to cry. As the truck pulled away, Emily sitting stiffly in the passenger seat, I felt a strange mix of relief and sadness. My marriage was over, my family shattered. But the lies, the manipulation, the poison Raymond and Emily had spread were finally being flushed out. It wasn't victory, not yet, but it was a step closer. And I wasn't done. Not by a long shot. The quiet in the house was unsettling. Every corner, every room felt heavier without Emily's presence. But it wasn't the peace I had expected. My kids moved through the house like shadows, silent, cautious, still too young to grasp the full weight of what had happened. I kept myself busy, working through legal paperwork, strategizing the next move. But my thoughts always circled back to Raymond and Emily. They were down but not out. That morning, my lawyer called. We're getting pushback from Raymond's attorney, he said. They're trying to paint you as unstable. A man lashing out because his marriage fell apart. I clenched the phone tighter. They have no defense. Everything I gave you is irrefutable. They're desperate, he replied. But desperation can make people dangerous. Watch yourself. I hung up and stared out the window, the weight of his words sinking in. Desperation. I knew Raymond wouldn't go quietly. He'd come back swinging. And I'd be ready. Later that day, I received an unexpected email. It was from a family friend, someone I hadn't heard from in months. The subject line read, "You need to see this." I clicked it open, my pulse spiking. Attached was a short video clip, grainy, shaky, clearly filmed on a phone. I pressed play and my blood ran cold. Raymond sat in a booth at a small diner, leaning across the table to talk to a man I didn't recognize. His voice was low but clear enough to make out. He thinks he's won, Raymond said, his mouth twisting into that smug smile I hated. But he has no idea what's coming. I've got people on my side. People who'll make sure he regrets messing with me. The man across from him asked something I couldn't hear, but Raymond's response was crystal clear. I'll ruin him. I don't care what it takes. The clip ended abruptly. My hands shook as I set the laptop aside. Raymond wasn't just angry, he was plotting something else. I forwarded the video to Greg and my lawyer with a single note. What do we do with this? Greg replied almost immediately. We make sure you hit first. The next morning, I paid Raymond a visit. I knew where to find him, at his favorite coffee shop, the one where he held court like a king on his throne. When I walked in, he was sitting near the window, a half-finished cup of coffee in front of him. His eyes narrowed as I approached. What the hell are you doing here? I pulled the chair opposite him, sitting down without asking. You've been busy, I said calmly. Real busy, huh? Threatening me in diners now. Raymond's face flickered. Just a split second of surprise before he schooled it into his usual sneer. You don't know what you're talking about. I leaned in, dropping my voice low. I know you're desperate, Raymond. I know you think you can dig yourself out of this hole, but you're just making it deeper. He laughed bitterly, though there was no confidence behind it. You think this ends with me? You think you've won because you humiliated us? I'll show you what real destruction looks like. You already did. I shot back, my voice cold. You destroyed your own reputation, your own family. You think this is my doing? You did this to yourself. Raymond's jaw tightened, his hands curling into fists on the table. Watch your back. I stood, towering over him. No, Raymond, you should watch yours. Because I'm not letting you or Emily drag my kids or me down any further. It's over. You just haven't realized it yet. I turned and walked out, leaving him sitting there, stewing in his own failure. That evening, my lawyer called again, his voice more confident this time. The video you sent, that diner recording, will bury him in court. Combined with the DNA tests, we can prove a clear pattern of manipulation, deceit, and malicious intent. This strengthens everything. I exhaled, tension leaving me bit by bit. So we're good. We're better than good, he replied. Raymond's threats just handed us a golden ticket. I'll push for a hearing as soon as possible. Be ready. That night, I sat in the living room with Luke and Ava, watching them try to piece together a puzzle on the floor. For the first time in weeks, they seemed calm, like kids again. Dad, Luke said suddenly, looking up at me. Are things going to be okay? I managed to smile. Yeah, buddy. Things are going to be okay. It wasn't just for him. I believed it. The walls were closing in on Raymond and Emily, and they couldn't stop it now. The truth was out. But I knew the real fight was coming. When we stepped into that courtroom, it wouldn't just be about revenge or pride. It would be about taking back control. And I wasn't going to lose. The courtroom was dead silent except for the echo of my footsteps as I walked to the stand. Sunlight streamed through tall windows, cutting sharp angles across the polished floors. This wasn't just a legal battle. This was the final chapter. Raymond sat to my left, Emily beside him, her face pale and drawn. The weight of their choices pressed down on them now. No smiles, no confidence, just hollow shells of the people they once pretended to be. My lawyer stood, his voice calm, deliberate. Mr. Hale, can you tell the court why you requested this hearing today? I sat tall, hands clasped together to steady myself. My voice was firm. To expose the truth, to make sure my children are protected, and to put an end to the manipulation and deceit that's poisoned my life. I could feel the eyes of everyone in the room. Family members, old friends, even strangers who'd come to see the spectacle. But I didn't care. My focus stayed on Raymond and Emily, the people who thought they could destroy me and walk away untouched. My lawyer clicked a remote, and the familiar footage played on the courtroom screen. Voices I'd heard 1,000 times before echoed off the walls. This isn't just about being free of him. This is about showing him he's nothing. Raymond's words rang louder in the courtroom than they ever had on my screen. I watched as his face turned a sick shade of gray. The next clip followed. He's been raising your kids this whole time, Ray. Can you imagine his face when he finds out? I hope he cries. The murmurs in the gallery grew louder. Emily sat frozen, her shoulders hunched. I looked at her, but there was no pity left in me. Her tears couldn't undo what she'd done. When the recordings ended, my lawyer turned to the judge. These videos prove malicious intent. They show years of psychological abuse against my client, orchestrated by his wife and stepfather. This wasn't a mistake. It was a premeditated act of cruelty. Raymond's attorney tried to object, but it was futile. Everyone had seen the truth. The judge's verdict came swiftly. Custody of the children was awarded to me. Raymond's involvement in our lives was severed completely, legally and permanently. Emily, her betrayal laid bare, was granted limited visitation under strict conditions. As we walked out of the courthouse, Raymond trailed behind, his shoulders slumped, his arrogance shattered. He'd spent years trying to tear me down, but in the end, he destroyed himself. Outside, Luke and Ava waited with Greg. When Ava saw me, she ran forward, throwing her arms around my waist. Is it over? She whispered into my coat. I rested a hand on her head, staring at the courthouse doors where Emily and Raymond lingered, now irrelevant. Yeah, I said softly. It's over. Luke stepped up beside me, his gaze serious, older than it should have been. We're staying with you, right? I looked down at him and nodded. Always. Greg clapped me on the shoulder, his voice low. You did it, man. They got what they deserved. But as I looked at my kids, their confused and fragile faces, I realized something. Winning doesn't undo the pain. Months later, I sat on the porch as the sun dipped low, turning the sky gold. Luke and Ava played in the yard, laughing freely in a way I hadn't heard in months. The weight that had hung over us was lifting, piece by piece. I sipped my coffee and thought about everything, about betrayal, revenge, and survival. It's easy to let anger consume you when you've been wronged, to let it pull you into the dark. I'd been there, but in the end, revenge wasn't what saved me. It was the truth. The truth, no matter how ugly, is what sets you free. Raymond had tried to break me, but he only proved one thing. A man's strength isn't in what he loses. It's in what he refuses to let destroy him. I glanced at my kids, my voice quiet but resolute. We're going to be okay. And we were. Life doesn't hand you guarantees. People you love will fail you. You'll fail yourself sometimes, too. But when the storm comes, you stand tall, you fight, and you walk through it with your dignity intact. Because in the end, that's all a man really has.
The sound of the attic ladder unfolding was softer than Brian expected. Not that it mattered. Dana had already slipped into that half-snore she insisted wasn't snoring. He stood in the hallway for a few seconds longer than he needed to, listening to it. Not because he was hesitant, but because he was grounding himself. The way a surgeon might take one last breath before making the first incision. Downstairs, his dinner plate sat untouched. He'd poured her the last of the Merlot. Let her have the bigger cut of steak. Lit a candle like some worn-out cliché. And for what? So she could lean across the table, eyes glassy with wine, and chirp. Sometimes I still picture Carl when we're intimate. She said it like she was commenting on the weather. Or a movie quote. Something she thought was quirky, spontaneous. But all Brian heard was a demolition charge going off under 31 years of careful restraint. He didn't react. Not then. Just nodded, took her plate to the sink, and asked if she wanted tea. She said no, and went to bed humming. Listen, quick break. We set a goal to hit 10K subscribers. So tap subscribe if you're liking these wild stories of betrayal. Now let's get back to the madness. The attic was stuffy, full of the forgotten and the deliberately ignored. Brian wasn't sure what he was looking for exactly, only that something was here. He could feel it. Dana had mentioned, years ago, that her ex Carl had left some old junk up here after they broke up. Just tools and books, she'd said, with that tight smile she used when she didn't want questions. Nothing important. That was 9 years ago. Brian stepped over a broken lamp, a tattered baby gate, and a mold-streaked Halloween bin before finding it. Tucked behind a stack of insulation boards, beneath a faded blanket. A gray metal case with a busted handle and rust-kissed corners. Heavy, locked. On the lid, barely visible under grime. Private. Most people might have left it. But Brian wasn't most people. He was a mechanical designer. Picking a cheap lock was child's play. The lid groaned as it opened. Inside, a stack of envelopes, yellowed paper, 3 Polaroids held together with a rubber band, and at the bottom, an old manila folder sealed with a paperclip. The first envelope caught his eye. To Carl. In case you ever need leverage, especially if the kid finds out. He didn't open it. Not yet. Not because he was afraid, but because he wanted to savor the moment. He leaned back against the dusty wall, closed the case again, and sat with it in his lap. The attic smelled of fiberglass and old betrayal. His fingers were blackened from dust and ink. And his heartbeat? Steady. Ice cold. What bothered him most wasn't that Dana still thought of her ex while they were intimate. It was that she enjoyed telling him. Like it gave her a little thrill, this private dagger she could twist, just enough to watch him flinch. But he didn't flinch. He gathered the letters, tucked the folder into his sweatshirt, and climbed back down. He didn't even glance at her as he passed the bedroom. Her mouth was half open. She drooled a little on her pillow. Brian walked into the garage, pulled the cord to the attic storage above the rafters, opened a locked box he hadn't touched in a decade. Inside, his old drafting tools, a burner phone, and a hard drive. He smiled. You don't build machines for 40 years without learning how to dismantle something quietly, piece by piece, until it collapses on its own. And Dana? She just handed him the blueprint. The box wasn't just a box. It was a tumor, wedged into the house's bones. Heavy, warm to the touch, despite the attic's cold. And it hadn't been forgotten, just ignored. Which was worse. Brian carried it down like he was moving a body. One step at a time, the ladder creaking under the dead weight of whatever lay inside. He set it on the kitchen table, poured himself a neat bourbon. No ice. Just the silence of 2:14 a.m., and Dana's low breathing echoing faintly through the ceiling. The lock was cheap. Brian didn't even bother with tools. Just a bent nail and muscle memory. A click. Then air, thick with paper mold and old cologne, hit his face. Inside, a neat stack of legal papers, yellowed photographs clipped with handwritten notes, and a sealed manila envelope. The kind that used to circulate confidential memos in 90s office parks. To Carl. In case you ever need leverage, especially if the kid finds out. Brian stared at the envelope for a full minute. No blinking. No movement. Just that one phrase humming in his skull like a tuning fork. Leverage. If the kid finds out. He reached for the photos first. Carl, younger, standing with Dana, arms slung around each other at a beach party. One of them kissing her neck. Another with a toddler on his lap. Date stamped in red ink. March 2000. Brian's stepson, Alex, was born in September that same year. He flipped to a handwritten page tucked inside. Carl, if anything happens, if she flips on you, this is your insurance. Don't destroy it. She plays innocent now, but she's capable of worse. You know it. No signature. But the handwriting, agitated, slanted, looked like Carl's from old holiday cards Dana kept in the junk drawer. Brian leaned back in his chair. It didn't creak. It never creaked. He'd reinforced every joint himself. So Carl had insurance. Why would a man keep insurance unless he thought there was danger? Dana's story had always been simple. Alex isn't Carl's. We dated a bit, then I found out I was pregnant. I cut him off. No drama. No overlap. But now Brian held 3 Polaroids that told a different story. One with a pregnant Dana at a New Year's party. Carl's hand not on her waist, but on her stomach. He wasn't sure how long he sat there. Sometime around dawn, Dana padded down the stairs in a bathrobe, hair still wild. You're up early, she mumbled, rubbing her eyes. What are you doing? Brian closed the case slowly. Locked it. Wiped his hands on a dish towel and smiled. Just organizing some of the junk up there. Might clear space this weekend. She blinked. You couldn't sleep? He shrugged. I was thinking. About what? Everything, he said. You know how it is at our age. Nostalgia. She laughed. God, don't go getting sentimental on me now. He looked at her for a moment, really looked, and said, yeah, that'd be awful. She turned, muttering something about coffee. He watched her walk away, the robe barely tied. Then he slipped the manila envelope into a new padded mailer and labeled it simply. Return to sender. Later that afternoon, while Dana napped, he drove 3 towns over and mailed it from a drop box near the freeway. No return address. Just the envelope, and its sentence like a loaded gun. In case you ever need leverage, especially if the kid finds out. Brian didn't need to destroy her. He just needed to light the fuse and let her own past burn down the house. The camera was no bigger than a thumb, tucked behind a decorative smoke alarm in the hallway ceiling. No blinking lights. No hum. Silent. Still, just like Brian. He told himself it wasn't spying. Not really. Spying was about curiosity. This was confirmation. Proof of a pattern he'd started noticing a year ago but hadn't wanted to admit. How Dana would wait until Brian was out in the garage or on his morning walk, then drift into Alex's room and linger. How Alex's voice, always low and resentful, would rise with indignation, then drop into that oily, indulgent tone of self-pity. Brian didn't monitor in real time. That wasn't the point. Every night, he waited until Dana had dozed off with a book on her chest, then slipped into his office. He'd cue the footage and scrub through it like an old man flipping a coin he already knew was rigged. Day 3. Dana knocks lightly on Alex's door. You doing okay, baby? A grunt. I was just thinking, your real dad? He'd have said yes to that funding. He always believed in you. Brian just doesn't get the whole entrepreneur thing. Day 5. Alex. He acts like he's doing us a favor just paying bills. Dana. He's always been small-minded. Comfortable. You? You're a builder, like your real dad. Day 9. Dana again. Don't take it personal. He was never meant to lead. Just support. Brian paused that one. Rewound it. Played it again. He was never meant to lead. She said it like an observation, like a medical diagnosis, a recorded certainty. What made it worse wasn't the cruelty, it was the casualness. The way she weaponized praise for her ex to cut down the man who kept this house running, who paid the mortgage, who fixed the goddamn furnace himself when the repair guy ghosted them. And Alex, 27 years old, still living at home, still working on a pitch deck that looked suspiciously like a Canva template copied from Reddit, soaked it up like a spoiled sponge. Brian didn't tell Dana or confront her. That would be playing his hand too early. Instead, he compiled the footage, clipped the key quotes, organized the audio, even layered in a timestamped transcript for each file. The drive he used wasn't new, it was one from his old consulting days. 128 gigabytes, solid state, encrypted, labeled only with a sticker. Repairs. He placed it in a hollowed-out book in his study. The book? The Art of Deception, Controlling the Human Element of Security. A gift from a former colleague, once meant as a joke. Now, a manual. He began watching Dana more carefully after that. Not just her words, but the rehearsal behind them. How her sympathy always arrived precisely when Alex needed a boost, and how quickly it turned into manipulation. Brian just doesn't get it. He's from a different time. He never took risks. Risk. That word came up a lot. Like the world owed her and her son something bigger, and Brian's caution, his thoughtfulness, was an inconvenience. Let them think he was dull, passive, predictable. He could play that part. He even brought home a fancy folder marked loan consideration documents and left it on the kitchen counter. Inside, nothing but blank pages and one typed line. Draft. Pending confirmation. Dana didn't even ask. She just smiled. Brian smiled back. Because now he had something she couldn't explain away. Not a suspicion. Not an argument. Data. And the worst thing you can give a quiet man isn't betrayal. It's motive. Carl looked older than his photos. Thinner, rougher around the edges. The kind of man who smelled like old grease and unspoken regrets. His hands were cracked. His eyes jumpy. They met in the back corner of a diner just off Highway 12. The kind of place where the coffee was always burnt and the booths had duct-taped cushions. Brian was already seated when Carl walked in, holding his baseball cap like it was evidence. He sat without a word. Neither spoke for the first full minute. Just the clink of silverware from other tables and a waitress humming something tuneless in the background. Then Carl leaned forward and said, "Where'd you find it?" Brian didn't blink. "Attic. It was buried under insulation. She said it was junk you left behind." Carl let out a bitter laugh, more exhale than amusement. "Yeah, well, she said a lot of things." Brian slid a small padded envelope across the table. Inside, a photocopy of the original letter, the photos, and one particular quote that had stuck in his mind like a splinter. "In case you ever need leverage, especially if the kid finds out." Carl didn't open it. He didn't need to. "I forgot I even wrote that," Carl said quietly. "I figured she'd burned it, or used it already." Brian folded his hands calmly. "She didn't. But she's been leveraging other things. Thought you might want to hear what she's been saying to your son. About you. About me." Carl flinched at the word "your son." His jaw tensed, but he didn't deny it. "That was enough. She told me," Brian continued, "that he wasn't yours. That she hadn't spoken to you in years. She told me," Carl interrupted, "that she'd take him away if I didn't walk. That she'd say I was unstable. That she'd drag me through court. Said the kid wasn't mine. Then said she'd tell him I abandoned him." Brian nodded once. "She told me he was just from a previous relationship. Said it was all before me. No legal strings. Just history." Carl finally opened the envelope. The photo of him, Dana, and a toddler fell out first. He stared at it like it was a ghost. "He used to cling to me," Carl said. "Wouldn't even go to her when I got home from the shop. She hated that." Silence. Heavy, but shared. "I'm not here to fight," Brian said finally. "But I've been fed half-truths for too long. I want the whole picture. I think she played us both, for different reasons." Carl leaned back. "You planning to go public?" Brian shook his head. "Not yet. I want him to know first. The kid deserves truth. Not fairy tales designed to protect her ego." Carl chuckled bitterly. "He's probably like her by now. Maybe. But I have data now. And leverage. Real leverage. Not whispers and guilt trips." Carl tapped the manila folder. You want me to back you up? I want clarity, Brian replied. If she lied to both of us, then she doesn't get to keep controlling the narrative. I'm not trying to ruin her. I'm trying to unwind the lie she's been living in. Carl sat quietly for a moment, then said, I'll tell you everything I know. But when you move, you better hit clean. No bluffing. She'll come at you sideways if she thinks you're bluffing. Brian gave the smallest nod. That's why I came to you first. Carl looked at him differently now. Less like a stranger. More like a co-defendant who just found out the prosecutor falsified evidence. The uneasy alliance began not with a handshake, but with Carl quietly sliding the folder back toward Brian and saying, She always hated people who kept receipts. Brian smiled, cold and thin. Good thing I kept everyone. Carl lit a cigarette outside the diner, even though the sign clearly said not to. He didn't ask, didn't look around, just flicked his Zippo, took a long drag, and stared into the distance like the trees might offer a simpler version of this story. Brian stood beside him in silence, watching the smoke curl up into the cold afternoon air. I wanted to be his father, Carl said finally, voice rough. I was scared, sure, but I was ready. Then one day she tells me, out of nowhere, it's not mine. Just drops it. No explanation. No tears. Just, don't call again. Brian nodded slowly. She told me it was a clean break. That the kid had no father. That he needed stability. Carl scoffed. She told me if I pushed it, she'd file harassment charges. Said she'd lie in court. That she'd say I was violent. I've got an old DUI from back then. I wasn't exactly hard to smear. Brian pulled the manila envelope from his coat pocket and held it out. You wrote this, didn't you? Carl hesitated, then took it. When he opened it and saw the full page again, his own scrawl, his own threats, the evidence she never burned, he went pale. I wrote this when I realized she boxed me out for good, he muttered. Figured if she ever came after me, I'd use it. But I never had the guts to send it. She made it clear, one word from me, and she'd take it to the edge. Brian's voice dropped to a level that no longer held space for empathy. She told me that he was just from some old boyfriend she barely remembered. That I didn't need to worry. No drama, she said. He looked Carl in the eye. And for 27 years, I paid. For school. For braces. For 2 failed gap years and that startup scam he calls a career. I stood there and let her paint me as the joyless dad who doesn't believe in dreams. Carl glanced over. You do believe in them, don't you? I believe in earned ones, Brian said coldly. Not ones built on pity and backroom scripts. Carl took another drag. So what now? You gonna tell him? Rip the Band-Aid off? I'm done pretending, Brian said. I raised him like a son, paid like a father, took the punches. But I'm not his real anything, and I'm not going to bankroll her lie a minute longer. Carl stared at him. That going to screw him up? Brian didn't blink. Good. Maybe it'll be the first true thing that ever happened to him. He reached into his coat again, pulled out a flash drive in a small envelope, and handed it over. This has every hallway recording, he said. Her whispering poison into his ear. Telling him I don't believe in him. Telling him his real dad would have supported him. That's you, by the way. Carl winced. She's been using both of us to manipulate him. Guilt, silence, confusion. Now we take that power back. Carl looked at the drive in his hand. What do you want me to do? Brian's answer was razor clean. Nothing. Yet. Just know where we stand. He walked to his car, didn't look back. Because something had shifted in him, something final. He wasn't playing husband anymore. He wasn't playing dad. He was pulling out of a life that had been wrapped around a lie for nearly 3 decades. And from now on, he'd be the one writing the story. Not Dana. Not Carl. Not the kid. Just him. And this time, it wouldn't be fiction. Brian placed the flash drive on his desk like it was a surgical instrument. Clean. Precise. Dangerous only when used correctly. The label was plain. Just a number. 0627. The password, stored nowhere physical, was a date only Alex would recognize. The birthday of his first dog. Brian had been the one who picked it up from the shelter. Who trained it. Who stayed up all night when it had seizures. Dana, predictably, had been too tired. The drive contained everything. The hallway recordings. Dana whispering that Brian never took risks, that his real dad would have written a check on the spot. The diner footage. Carl admitting he'd been blackmailed into silence. That he'd wanted to raise the boy, but Dana had threatened to nuke his life. And finally, a short message from Brian. Voice flat, calm, deliberate. You've been lied to, Alex. Not just about money. About your father. About loyalty. About identity. You deserve to choose who you are, but only if you know where you came from. Do what you want with this. Just know, investors like clean cap tables, and dirty secrets bleed equity. The envelope was addressed, but unstamped. Not yet. The moment hadn't come. Meanwhile, Dana's confidence ballooned. She flounced around the house, talking on speakerphone a little louder than necessary. Yeah, Brian's finally warming up to the loan idea. I think we'll have signatures by next week. Of course I'm handling it. Brian just needs the right push. She smiled at Brian across the kitchen while saying it. Like she was flirting. Like he was her little puppet and she'd finally tugged the right string. He smiled back. Maybe we should have a dinner. Family. Sit down. Get everything out in the open. She blinked. Hesitated just a second too long. Just us? She asked. No, Brian said. Let's invite Carl. She laughed. Carl? That's random. Not really, Brian replied, still smiling. You said Alex deserves a good launch, and we're all part of his support system. Let's unify the tribe. She tried to deflect. I don't even know if Carl's around. He moved or something, didn't he? But the gears were already turning. Brian kept his tone neutral. I've already talked to him. He's free Thursday. Dana blinked again. You already? He didn't let her finish. Just turned toward the fridge and said, I'll grill. Keeps it casual. The look on her face as she walked away said everything. A slight tightness in the jaw. A flicker of calculation. But also, tellingly, a flicker of relief. She thought it was a power move. That Brian was finally coming around. That the cosign was on the table, and all she had to do was keep the plate spinning. He let her believe it. He let her pick the wine. He let her talk Alex into showing off his little business pitch deck, complete with acronyms he didn't understand and financial projections copied from someone else's Medium article. Brian even printed fake loan documents. Had them watermarked, notary line and all. Let them pass the folder around the living room like it was holy scripture. But all the while, that flash drive sat in his drawer. Labeled. Loaded. Waiting. Because revenge wasn't about the explosion. It was about the quiet click before the detonation. And dinner? Dinner would be the match. Dana was adjusting the table runner like it mattered. As if symmetry could protect her from what was coming. Brian had grilled steak. Medium rare for Alex. Dry and overcooked for himself. Just the way Dana always accidentally preferred it for him. The wine she chose, an overpriced Napa Red, was already breathing. Alex had his startup deck propped on the counter, ready for his little presentation. And Dana? She was glowing. Comfortable. In control. Right up until the doorbell rang. Who else is coming? She asked, already halfway to the door, voice too casual. Brian didn't answer. The door opened. Carl stepped in. No fanfare. No smile. Just a quiet nod toward Brian. Then to Alex. Hey. Dana stood frozen, hand still on the doorknob. Her mouth moved, but no sound came out for a few beats. Brian wiped his hands on a dish towel and walked over. He should be here for this. Since, you know, we've been co-parenting all these years. Alex furrowed his brow. What's going on? Dana snapped back to life. Carl was just leaving. Carl didn't budge. No, Dana. I'm not. Brian gestured to the table. Let's eat. Then talk. I think there's been enough whispers in hallways. They sat. Awkwardly. Dana picked at her food. Alex kept looking between the three of them like someone had slipped acid into his lemonade. And then Carl leaned forward. I wasn't supposed to be here, he said. But I was tired of letting her run the script. So here I am. And I've got some things to say. Dana dropped her fork. This is not the time. Then when is the time? Carl asked. When he's 40. When another investor asks who his biological father is, and she's still spinning fairy tales. Alex sat up straighter. What? Brian stayed silent. He'd already pressed record on his phone. The device sat on the counter, screen dark, microphone live. Carl pulled out a single sheet of paper, an old paternity claim, and signed, never filed. He placed it next to Alex's water glass. She told me you weren't mine. Then told me if I pushed it, she'd accuse me of stalking. I believed her. I walked. I thought I was protecting you. Dana's voice pitched up. He doesn't need protecting from you. He needs protection from this nonsense. Brian tilted his head. Let him talk. Alex looked pale. Is this true? Dana stood abruptly. Don't listen to him. He's trying to ruin your launch. Brian set this up. It's an ambush. Carl, quietly. I didn't come to hurt you. I came to stop lying to you. Brian calmly. So did I. Dana pointed at Carl, then at Brian. You're both pathetic. Bitter men trying to. Enough, Alex barked. Everyone froze. Alex pushed back from the table. If there's something to say, someone say it. Clearly. Now. Brian reached under his chair and pulled out a small folder. Inside, a printed transcript of Dana's hallway whisperings, quotes highlighted in yellow. He handed it to Alex without looking at her. She's been telling you half-truths for years. Gaslighting you. Using your father's absence as emotional currency. Dana lunged for the folder. Alex stepped back. Don't. Her face twisted. You think they care about you? They just want to punish me. Brian didn't flinch. No, Dana. I want you to hear your own words. I want him to hear them too. Alex opened the folder. Read silently. His hand trembled. Carl stood. You're my son. I didn't leave because I didn't want you. I left because your mother made it clear she'd burn it all down if I stayed. Dana's voice cracked into a scream. You're a liar. Brian pressed a button on his phone. Her voice, from a recording. Your real dad would have funded your startup. Not Brian. He doesn't believe in you. Then another. He's just support. You're meant for more. Silence. Alex dropped the folder. Dana looked like she'd been slapped. Brian stood and picked up his plate. I think dinner's over. Carl followed. Alex didn't move. Didn't speak. Just stared at his mother with a look Brian had never seen in him before. Recognition. Dana, trembling now, whispered, I did it all for you. Alex finally replied, No, you did it all for you. And the house, once filled with curated warmth and performative peace, collapsed into something far colder than quiet. Truth. The meeting was scheduled for 11 a.m. sharp at a glass-paneled co-working space downtown. Alex wore his best shirt, untucked, of course, paired with the blazer Dana had bought for him the week prior. He showed up buzzing with nervous energy, caffeinated and rehearsed, with the confidence of someone who believed a good pitch could cover a shaky product. The investor, a tall man in his early 60s, went by Mitch. Balding, dry smile, Harvard ring. What Alex didn't know was that Mitch used to share a drafting table with Brian back in the day, 2 decades of design contracts, deals, and one unforgettable fishing trip where Brian pulled him out of a frozen lake with a dislocated shoulder. So when Brian handed Mitch the flash drive over a quiet lunch and said, Don't kill the deal. Just ask good questions, Mitch understood the assignment. The meeting began with the usual startup theater. Alex paced through slides, founder story, market gap, traction stats that felt suspiciously round, projections so inflated they should have come with a barf bag. But Mitch didn't interrupt. Not until slide 17. This is impressive, Mitch said, dryly. Tell me, how do you intend to manage early-stage equity with so many family stakeholders? Alex blinked. Family? It's just me. I mean, my mom helped some, but Mitch slid the flash drive across the table. Your pitch deck metadata still lists your mother as the original file creator. Did she structure the documents for you? Alex stammered. She formatted a few things. Mitch leaned forward. And your father? He's not involved. Not biologically anyway. My stepdad was. Brian. But he's out of the picture. Mitch didn't smile. That's strange. He's the one who sent me this. Alex picked up the drive. What is this? Recordings. Statements. Tax inconsistencies. A few, let's say, troubling legal implications involving a falsified parental history. Makes me wonder how much of this startup's foundation is narrative and how much is fraud. The meeting ended 10 minutes later. No handshake. No follow-up scheduled. Just Alex, white-faced, storming out of the building with his laptop flopping in his messenger bag and sweat soaking through the back of his shirt. When he got home, Dana was waiting on the porch. Before she could speak, he threw the flash drive at her feet. You lied to me. Alex, wait. No. You lied to everyone. You told me Carl left us. You told me Brian didn't care. And now he's the only one who tried to warn me. She reached for his arm. He flinched back. You cost me my investor, he shouted. You cost me everything. Dana stood frozen on the steps as Alex walked past her, straight into the house, slammed the door, and locked it behind him. 30 minutes later, Dana called Brian. Twice. Then a third time. No answer. On the fourth try, she left a voicemail, voice cracking mid-sentence. Please, Brian, just talk to me. I didn't mean for it to. He won't even look at me, please. Brian sat on a bench by the lake, phone face down beside him. The sun was setting. A gentle ripple moved across the surface of the water, undisturbed. He took a sip of his coffee, closed his eyes, listened to nothing. No phone call, no excuses, no more rewriting the truth. Just the silence she'd earned. The envelope was hand-delivered by a man in a gray suit with zero facial expression. Dana opened it at the kitchen counter, expecting maybe a credit notice, a summons for a civil hearing over the investor debacle, something manageable. What she got instead was 17 pages of legal ice water. Notice of petition, retroactive custodial misrepresentation and declaratory parentage dispute. Filed, Brian D. Langston. Against, Dana R. Caldwell. She scanned the phrases that mattered. Fraudulent declaration of paternity. Improper assignment of financial obligation. Incorrect use of dependent for federal and private filings. Request for reimbursement assessment and potential referral for civil liability charges. Her breath hitched. She grabbed the counter to steady herself. And then the real stomach drop. A formal request to have Alex's birth certificate legally amended. Father's name, under review. The legal dominoes that one move would knock over. She could see them now, clear as glass and twice as brittle. Past insurance claims. College aid packages. Tax returns she'd confidently signed on Brian's behalf for over a decade. Retroactive audits. Financial disclosures. The grant she helped Alex apply for last year under false parentage data. Each line now a little landmine. Dana's hand shook as she reached for her phone. Not to call Brian, but to Google. Retroactive custody fraud charges, penalties. Can a birth certificate be changed after 25 years? How to undo paternal listing on IRS dependents. The results didn't soothe her. It took her 40 minutes to stop hyperventilating long enough to drive. She showed up at Brian's rental like a winded ghost, hair tied back hastily, eyes ringed with red. She didn't even knock, just stood on his porch until he opened the door. He didn't invite her in. Please, she said, voice already cracking. Please, Brian, don't do this. It was complicated. It was never meant to be. You didn't mean for me to raise someone else's child thinking he was mine? Brian asked, his voice flat. Or you didn't mean to lie to two men for 30 years and use that lie to cash checks and buy time? I panicked, she whispered. I was alone. Carl was a mess. And I was convenient. She swallowed hard. I didn't know how to tell you. You knew how to let me pay? Every month. Every bill. Every broken thing. You just didn't know how to confess. Tears streamed down her face now. He's going to hate me. Brian shook his head slowly. No, Dana. He's going to see you. Maybe for the first time. She gripped the doorway like it might hold her up. They said I could face charges. Actual charges. Brian, please. You're not like this. No, he said. I wasn't. But you made me like this. I was scared, she said. I didn't want to lose everything. Brian leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. You already did. She reached out to touch his arm. He stepped back. Her voice cracked down the middle. So what happens now? Brian looked at her for a long beat, then said, with unblinking calm, now? The truth has to catch up to the paperwork. And then, without another word, he closed the door. Inside, he locked it. Not out of anger, but out of clarity, because the past didn't vanish. It filed motions. Dana hadn't been in the attic since the night she saw Brian pull the stairs down with that calm, silent fury. Back then, she assumed it was one of his moods, quiet spells he'd retreat into when life didn't meet his engineering standards. That's what she always told herself. He's just too methodical. He'll simmer, then forget. But tonight, something in her chest told her the attic held her answer. Not the court filings. Not the voicemail from Alex that never came. Not even Carl's lawyer reaching out for a declaratory custodial review. The answer, she believed, lived where it had all started. Up those creaky steps and into the last part of the house that hadn't been scrubbed clean by consequence. The stairs groaned as she pulled them down. Dust fell in little flurries, like ash. She climbed with hesitation, half afraid of what she'd find, half afraid of what she wouldn't. The attic was empty. The metal case was gone. The old boxes of forgotten baby clothes and holiday wreaths remained, but that corner, the one she always told herself Carl's junk was tucked in, was barren. The insulation board had been stacked neatly. The blanket she once used to cover the box was folded with surgical precision on a nearby shelf. In its place, a plain manila folder. No lock, no seals, just sitting there. She approached it like it might detonate. Inside were printed transcripts of the hallway recordings. Dana's voice, over and over, whispering manipulation into her son's ear. Brian doesn't understand real ambition. Your real dad would have believed in you. You're not like him. You're meant for more. Each quote time-stamped, neatly labeled, page after page. And then, taped to the final transcript, a handwritten note. Brian's script, precise, mechanical, unmistakable. I won't ruin your life. I just gave it back to the people you took it from. Dana sank onto the attic floor, the note fluttering in her lap. That was it. No more shouting. No lawsuits. No police. Just subtraction. The case, gone. The leverage, gone. The illusion, burned clean off the bones of her past. And now? No calls from Alex. Not even a cold text. Carl's attorney had called earlier with calm efficiency. We'd like to move forward with legal acknowledgement. Your cooperation would be appreciated. Brian, moved out weeks ago. Quiet rental by the lake. No forwarding address. No confrontation. No grand farewell. Just gone. She looked up at the beams overhead, the ones Brian had reinforced himself during the remodel. They were flawless. Level. Cold. The attic used to be where they stored memories. Now it was a museum of absence. And Dana? She sat beneath the dangling attic bulb, staring at the spot where the ladder used to meet the hatch, where Brian had once stood, silhouetted in silence, looking down at her life's architecture and seeing it for what it really was, a lie supported by sentimentality and selective truth. Now there was no exit, no ladder, no one left to climb down for her, just her, and the silence she'd mistaken for safety.